So this is the fun part. You're on your ride and you get a flat tire. I forgot to take the air out of this tire. But just so you're aware, take this little guy off, which your bike may or may not have come with this little cap. And this is your valve stem, at least if you have a Prestatube. And this little guy opens and closes. So you don't want to go too crazy with it, but you can depress that, get all that air out of here. And this, a lot of people I don't think realize they need this little bit. So this is a little nut that'll keep your tube in place in order for you to inflate your tire properly. So you want to keep these in a safe place. I'm going to put them in my pocket and try to remember that. So, alright, so we've got our flat tire here. Let's kind of look at how to get it off. So if you're lucky enough, your bead, so that's kind of this piece of the tire here, won't be too far set into the rim. Now there are definitely a few situations where that's going to happen, where the bead's going to set in there really tight. That usually happens a lot on tubeless setups, mostly because the design of it is so that that bead wants to stay in there and seat. And then also you have the sealant in there, which is kind of creating a glue or coagulant to make sure that there's no air escaping between that bead sitting in the rim and the tire itself. So that can be quite a tough thing to do. And then there's also just some different brands of rims and profiles of rims that depending on the brand of tire that you marry to it, can just be really difficult to get on and off. This one I don't think will be too bad today. So this is a Bontrager rim with a Continental Grand Sport Race tire on here. So these are a little bit more flexible of a tire, so hopefully I won't have too hard of a time getting it off. But a good way to kind of go around and get the tire bead removed is pressing your thumbs down and trying to break that seal. I've actually this tire has already, the seal's not even on there, so I lucked out. Sorry, I'm probably making it look a little bit easier than what it will be out in the field for you, but for demonstration purposes, hopefully it will be a good time for me. So once you kind of break that, and I try to do it on both sides, so I'll kind of go around on both sides and try to peel that tire away. I don't know if this will pick up or not, but try to peel that tire away from the rim. And that will give you some wiggle room for when you use your tire levers. So today I was out riding with my seat pack. Oh, lucky me. I have all of my tools with me. Go me. I was so well prepared for this. So I'm gonna go into my little seat pack, and I have I have my patch kit in here. Awesome. And what I'm looking for right now are my tire levers, which I have a little bit of a mismatch in here, but it works. So I've got my Giant branded one, and I have one of those TL-1s that I talked about in our first video. I also have a tube in here, CO2 cartridge, a stick-on patch kit, and a little CO2 inflator. So we're just gonna pretend like the tube that's in this tire is damaged. I'm, spoiler alert, gonna reuse it unless I do something wrong. So what you kind of want to do first is, I tend to work close to the valve side, so that way I can just kind of work my way around the tire, plus it's just like a good stop-start point. So I'll pull the tire back again from the rim and try to use my tire lever to pry a bit of the tire bead. So this is called the bead, this little part that sits in, and these can be wire or these can be Kevlar. Sorry if my light kind of sucks right here. But I may be able to, oh, see, I'm making this too easy. I was able to break the bead over with just one tire lever. So in another instance where you maybe need to use a couple and the bead's really tight and the tire's really hard to get off, tire levers have these little handy clips that'll clip them in place. So if you need to use a second one to try to kind of work your way around, you could then use the second one, clip that little guy in if you have a third one, or if you want to pop this one out and then keep working your way around. Boom. Like, that's a really good way to kind of work a tough tire. The bead's so loose on this one that just fell out, but so usually you want to go around. Once you kind of break that seal, I just go all the way around the tire, take it all the way around, pull one side of that bead off. I'm good to go. So one side of the tire is kind of flipped over the edge. The next thing I want to do is work on getting the tube out, so I'll kind of do the same thing where I'll start at the valve side and pull the tire aside, start pulling out that tube. So again, depending on your wheel rim combo, it might be a huge pain in the ass, or it might be fine. Like this one, I'm shocked. Usually Continental and Bontrager don't play that well together, so I'm very surprised at how easy this has been. So pull your tube out, and sometimes you have to pull the tire to the side to get the tube out here. But so I've got my tube out. The next thing is you're going to want to take the whole tire off. Just if you have a flat and you don't know how you got it, if you know how you got it, this may not be necessary, but if you don't know, you're going to want to just take that whole bad boy right off. So you're going to have to peel it off the other side. Again, I'm sorry I'm making this look a little bit easier than it usually is out in the field, but it can be a pain in the ass to get that other side of the tire off of the rim. So got the tire off. The next thing you're gonna do is inspect it. So you're gonna want to look, if you don't know how you got your flat, you're gonna want to look for pieces of glass, small pieces of metal, staples, nails, anything that could have gone into the tires, or if you can identify if there's a hole in it or where the damage took place. Usually, so tidbit of information, your bike mechanic usually is going to try to line up your valve stem with the biggest logo or brand on the side of your tire. And part of that is because it'll make it easier for when you go to air up your tire to find the the valve stem. B is that when you are inspecting your tire, if you find something in your tire and you go from that spot, you can kind of get an idea of where it may be in the tube. So if you want to patch the tube, if you can, that'll make it easier to locate the hole that possibly caused the flat. So on my tire, I'm going to just kind of hold it out like this. I kind of tend to spread it with my fingers, but you want to be very careful. I mean, if you're wearing cycling gloves or something like that, that's probably pretty smart to do. So I'll pull it out. I'll just basically start from the logo and just kind of look and see. You may want to even feel if your tire has a wire bead, if the wire bead is sticking out. Sometimes if your tires are old or starting to get rotted, that can happen. That's happened to me a couple of times. So I'll just kind of go through and feel and look and just inspect. You know, if your tires are old enough, it could be that this sidewall blew, or you have a hole there or something like that. If you didn't have enough air in your tires, you can pinch flat, which usually creates a snake bite effect in the tube. So you may not even realize, like, oh, there's nothing, you know, I can't find anything in my tire. Oh, that's because you were running too low of pressure, you went over a railroad track, or went over a curb or a pothole or something, and poof, you know, it happens all the time. So make sure you're checking your tire pressure before you leave on your rides. So yeah, I'll usually go around. Obviously, this is practically a brand new tire. There's nothing in it, but if there was, you know, I would try to find it, then try to line it up on the tube, see if I can fix the tube in any sort of way. In this video, I'm not going to cover how to patch a tube. I think we're going to save that for another one, so stay tuned. Alright, so let's theoretically say I found a hole in my tire, or I ran over like a tiny staple or a tiny piece of glass or a piece of shale rock or something. Alright, so if you're lucky enough to be able to pull it out, go ahead, do that, be careful, try not to cut yourself. You know, inspect your tube basically the same way. Start from the valve core. If you have a hand pump, this is where this comes in handy. So this is the downside of CO2 cartridges, is it's a little less convenient to do this. But if you have a hand pump, or even you can use your mouth, although that's kind of gross, put a little bit of air in the tube, and sometimes you can find the source. If you blow it up enough to kind of oversize it, sometimes you can feel it. You can put your ear up to it, try to be very quiet, just listen. Occasionally even the valve core itself, especially on tubes with removable valve cores, can just be loose and you could have just been losing air. Or even, especially on Schrader valves, when people forget to pump up their tires and they've left them for a couple of months, this especially for some reason happens on Schrader valves over pressure valves, that the actual part, this part where the valve core comes out around it, will be like cut, or there'll be a hole there. That we see a lot of times. So don't neglect your tires. Even if your bike has been sitting, it's in the winter months, it's going to sit there for 3 months, go down there every couple of weeks, go put some air in your tires, because that'll prevent that from happening. So it'll keep your tubes and your tires happy. Most of the time when we're doing repairs on flats and new tires and new tubes, it's because people just didn't air them up. They're dry rotted, they're neglected, they've been sitting flat like this for months, which definitely kills the sidewalls. So be sure to air up your tires regularly if your bike is in long-term storage, or even if it's in short-term storage. Doesn't matter. Just try to make it a good habit. All right, so theoretically, this is a brand new tube. Oh, okay, I couldn't fix the other one, or I just don't even want to deal with patching it, whatever. Just save it for later, do it at home. Which is kind of more my my thing. Is usually I'll just say forget it. I'll just throw a new tube in and I'll worry about patching it down the road, or what have you. So the next thing you're going to want to do before you start throwing a new tube in is getting your tire back on. So again, looking for the most apparently large logo on the tire. I don't know if this is going to focus or not, but that's the biggest one. A lot of tires do have directions. On the front wheel, it's not as apparent, but usually the lever side is going to be the non-drive side. So like you can picture the lever side of your wheel is moving forward in that direction. So usually then what I do after, see, I just lost my valve hole. Locating your valve hole is then making sure, am I putting this tire on in the right direction? Because a lot of tires do have directions. Again, on road tires where it's kind of slick, doesn't usually matter, but usually if there's some sort of like arrow shape on the tire, if it's pointing forward, that usually means that's the right direction. But some will actually have something that says direction this way, and it's not always on what you would assume to be the drive side. A lot of times they throw information on the non-drive side, which never really made sense to me. I thought I'm more of the just put it all on the, yeah, so see there's a, well no you don't see because this lighting is horrible, but there's a little bit with it depressed into the tire that says rotation this way, and it's on the non-drive side, which to me again doesn't make sense. I don't know why they do that. So I will start putting the tire on one side at a time. So just slipping that bead over again. Sorry, this is a little bit easier of a tire to work with. If you have a wire bead tire or one that fits really tightly, this is gonna be not the most easy thing to do, but you gotta do it. Use your hands, use leverage. You can see I'm kind of using my leg here. Usually I don't do this standing as well, so it's a little bit awkward for me, but alright, so I've got it on one side. Alright, just making sure my Grand Sport Race logo is facing the right direction. I'm going to set this down for a second. So we're going to assume that I have a road pump. Again, you can do this with CO2, but it's going to be a little bit more tricky to control how much air you're putting in. For today's purposes, I'm just going to use my pump. So I'm going to make sure this little piece, if you have a Presta, is open. If you have a Schrader, you don't really have to worry about it. They just go on. This is a dual-headed pump, so it doesn't matter if I'm using pressed or Schrader, but you press the pump head on there with it not up. If you try putting this on with it up is creating a seal. So if you're trying to put this on here and you're like, what the hell, it doesn't work, that's because, no, don't do that. You want to put the pump head on your tube with the lever in the down position. You want to hold it straight so you're not bending anything, and then lifting this up to create the seal. That's a big common misunderstanding of how to use pumps. So I'm just gonna put like 1 or 2.5-ish pumps of air in here, and then to release, you pull the lever down and just pull it right off. So right now I'm gonna close this up. So you want it just enough of air in here to just kind of like make a loose kind of noodly shape. This may even be a little much. It kind of depends on the tire and tube combination. A lot of people wonder, why do I have to put air in the tube before I put it back into the wheel? Mostly because you are way more likely to pinch flat the tube by pumping it up without putting a little bit of air in, because then you're not like 100% sure that there's no tube sticking out of the side of the tire. It makes it just a little bit more difficult. So I generally do not recommend doing that. Although some people swear by it, I think it's kind of the lazy person's way of doing it. So I always put just a little bit of air in, and then, oh cool, look at that. My logo shows me right where the valve hole is. So you're gonna take the side of your wheel where you have a little bit of that tire hanging off, and you're gonna pull it back, and you're gonna take it so that the valve hole is showing, and you can put your tube in, and then I kind of just pull the tire over. Now I'm gonna remember that I put all that little stuff in my pocket at the beginning of the video, but you guys forgot that I had it. Here it is. Or not the beginning of the video, but at some point in the video I put that stuff in my pocket so I wouldn't forget where it was. So this little lock nut does serve a purpose. Don't toss it. So what this does, it'll kind of hold the tube in place. It'll help pull the tube down, first of all, so it's not wanting to stick up outside of the tire. So it'll allow you to set the tube in a little bit easier. So I just tighten it down to as far as I can kind of get it. The other purpose is that it keeps the valve in place, so then when you go to air up your tire, it's not like pushing into, whoa, it's not pushing into the tire, and then it's like a huge pain in the butt. And yeah, that's another reason why you should air up your tires regularly, because that won't happen if there's enough air in there. So what I'm doing now, a lot of people laugh at me, but I call it stuffing the sausage. So, and if I laughed through that, it is stuffing the sausage, or stuffing the sausage. I don't know how it would read on captions, but so basically I'm just tucking the tube in to the tire. So I'm just pressing it up and in, and you can see my tire bead is kind of seated on the other side already, so I'm just kind of like tucking it in there. That way the bead will push in on this back side here. So I'll just kind of tuck it in. I can do this a lot faster if I'm not doing it on a video, but for your sake, I'm just gonna take it slow. Once you've done this a dozen times, it's super easy. It takes practice, and I think people get really intimidated by it, but it just takes practice, like anything. Like, it's not necessarily fun to sit around your house on a Friday night and practice putting tubes in your tires, but hey, if you don't have anything better to do, like we kind of are doing right now, why the hell not? So I'll start kind of back at my starting point. So that's when you kind of want to start putting the other side of the bead on. So I'm very carefully tucking this bead back in. Again, I'm making it look a little easy because I feel like I'm cheating. This tire and rim combination is kind of making my life a little bit easier for the moment. We'll see, though, how it all goes out. So sorry, I shouldn't be putting this down. Like I said, I usually am not necessarily standing and showing this on a video when I'm teaching these, so I will try to make sure you kind of see. So I'm kind of using my hands to push this back. And yeah, usually when you try to get towards the end, it gets a little difficult, and sometimes you can get it by hand to sit in there. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's a bear. And if you're lucky enough and have a friend who maybe has more hand strength with you, maybe asking them to do this part. Otherwise, there are some other methods you can use. You can, although it's not super duper recommended, these have 2 directions they can work. Let's see if camera, focus. I don't know, it's not focusing. It's too dark in here. Anyway, so you have the pry side to take it off, but then you have, if you flip it over, this little piece that'll kind of help it wedge back onto the tire, or the wheel, or rim, whatever you want to say. But you want to be very, very, very careful doing this. This, like 9 times out of 10, is when I pinch flat a tube is using this method. So I try not to. So if I'm in this scenario and I'm like, oh, damn, you know, I can't get this. Oh, I just lucked out and got it. If I'm lucky enough to do that, great. If not, this is the point of where I can let a little bit of air out of that tube. And maybe not all the way flat, but enough to where like I can get some purchase to like get that tube to move over enough so I can get the rest of that tire on. So at this point, some people just be like, cool, I'm just gonna air it up and go on my merry way. I do one last final check. So I go around each side of the tire and just try to push it back. And what I'm looking for here is like, again, this is kind of hard to show without like doing a supercut of a video, but pulling the tire back and looking between it and the rim and just making sure that there's no tube sticking out anywhere. So that's where you get into trouble. That's when all of a sudden you're, you know, pumping up your tire and all of a sudden it goes boom, is because it's likely that a little bit of the tube got stuck between the rim and the tire. So I just go around real quick. Again, you can start at your little valve stem, so you have a starting point and you know. And then once you hit that, you can, okay, cool, it looks good on this side. Just gonna check this side too. All right, I don't see any tube anywhere sticking out. It's nice and you can kind of feel it's between the beads of the tire. Cool. Everything's hunky-dory. Awesome. So now I can kind of go in and look at, you know what, I don't actually know how much air pressure I'm supposed to put in this thing. So that's when I'm going to look at the sidewall for our handy-dandy information that I kind of talked about in the first video. So, so they don't really give me a range on this tire. They say up to 120 PSI, which is like, I'm going to say it's overkill, unless you're like a 300-pound plus person. That's like, you don't need to put that much freaking air in your tire. I'm usually anywhere between like 172 to 180. At my most, I'm like 185 pounds. And I do like 80 pounds max usually in my tires. And that has been perfectly fine, and the ride is a lot less harsh. And I do even less when I'm a little bit lighter. And depending on if I'm running a different width of tire, just kind of, it's fun to play around with. I would definitely say, you know, try a few different things. So again, all right, so I did the same thing as I did before. So I opened up my little thing on my Presto valve here. I pushed my little head straight on to the valve, and then I opened up the lever to create that seal. So you can look at, my pump has a little gauge on it. Make sure you buy yourself a pump with a gauge. Can't go just by feel. Just having a rock hard tire or just like a squishy tire, like it tells you some information, but it doesn't usually tell you enough. So right now I have about 30 to 40 pounds. I know that this pump is slightly off. So I usually go a little bit under on this guy. Alright, so I have about 60 pounds. And I always do one little check just to kind of look for any bulges. And actually I maybe would have done this even before, but you just want to make sure. So another thing that I see a lot of people do is, especially, well, not always on road tires, I find this more so on like hybrids and things where it's a little bit like of a bigger tire and the tube's a little bit like squishier and stuff, is that the bead will have like popped off in a section and they don't realize it, and then they're pumping, and then boom, it explodes and they're like, what the heck happened? It's because you didn't stop and check. So I always just do a quick, like, just a little quick inspection. Cool, everything looks good on this side. Cool, everything looks good on this side. The other thing is, like, you put your tire on right too. There's usually a little kind of line embedded into the tire that'll kind of show you like how evenly the tire is placed on the rim. Now, I'm gonna be all like cyclist nerd and be like, oh, you want to pay attention to that because if it's a low spot, the tire's gonna ride weird. It will, but I mean, if you're on the side of the road, who cares? Like, just get your tire on. That you can deal with later, and usually that has more to do with like needing to like lubricate up your rim with something in order to like get that to set correctly, or like reseating the tire. There are other, like, you can do that later, don't worry about that, but it's just something to kind of like put in your mind just to pay attention to. So down the road, maybe in another video or something, we can kind of talk about that. But okay, cool. So I'm at like 60 pounds right now. Since my gauge is a little off, I'm probably just gonna go to like 70. Plus, the person who's riding this bike is a heck of a lot lighter than I am, so she doesn't need that much air in her tires. So I'm gonna go ahead and close up this guy. Close it right up on your pressed valve, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this back on. So now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to ride. Actually, this feels like a lot of air, so I'm gonna let a little bit more out. I think I'm just so used to riding larger, softer tires now that like any sort of tire tube situation that feels rock hard just feels wrong to me. There we go. That feels a lot better. And you can, like I said, experiment, kind of play around with your tire pressure. You'll know it when you hop on your bike and it feels like you're riding through sand, that you likely need to put more air in your tires. I check before I go almost every ride just to make sure, because I've definitely been in that situation and then I'm kicking myself because I'm not near a pump, and then I'm just like, oh damn, I have to ride like this. So that's pretty much all there is to it, at least for kind of like the basics. Obviously you can kind of go into more detail and learn a little bit more of different ways, like I said, to kind of patch up the tire or tube or what have you, but that just kind of is the basic, like, how do you just swap in a replacement tube kind of situation. So obviously I'll try to cover more in a next video, and I apologize if this one got a little bit long. It's just, it's a long subject matter to cover, and usually when I'm doing this in person, you know, it's a little bit faster and I can pair people up and they can kind of help each other, and boom boom boom, we kind of like get in and out of there within like an hour and a half or so. So yeah, so thank you for watching, and I hope you watched the first video. Again, I apologize for the lighting and sound situation. I just am working with what I have at the moment, so please understand what we're dealing with here. So thank you, and please stay tuned for the next videos. I'm going to try to kind of, as the weather allows, shoot them on nicer days, hopefully outside, and not down in here because it's kind of bleak. So, but thank you again for watching. Again, I'm with Fitchburg Cycles and Spoke Haven. My name is Cassandra. I'm one of 2 store managers at Fitchburg Cycles, and I do content creation on the side. I do reviews and informational videos. I have a blog at Spoke Haven, and I do kind of all the social media and web management stuff for Fitchburg Cycles as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any comments, questions, suggestions on content and what you would like to see in the future. All right, thank you so much for watching and have a lovely day. All right, bye.